This painting is a lie.
That painting is not real. The words pierced through the air like glass. The room stopped for a second. Every whisper and every clink of champagne stopped in its tracks. Even the string quartet in the corner stopped playing, their bows lingering over the chords. Everyone looked to the voice's source, a young black girl standing near the billion-dollar art show. Her hands shook, but she held her head high. Clarissa Doyle, the woman who administered almost every charity in Chicago, couldn't believe what she was hearing. Then her lips slowly twisted into a smile that was full of poison. "What did you just say, little girl?" The girl didn't move. This time, her voice was crisp and piercing, and it was perfect French. "Ce tableau est un faux." People in the gallery gasped. The remark, "That painting is fake," went through the gathering like a tempest that no one saw coming. Some attendees nervously laughed at each other, trying to make the moment into a joke. But they could feel it too, the change in the air. The kind of silence that comes when someone says something so true that you can't ignore it. Billionaire CEO Roland Kingsley cautiously turned toward her from the middle of the crowd. It was hard to tell what he was feeling. It was somewhere between anger and curiosity. The picture behind him, a Monet worth $20 million, was the best piece in his most recent collection. And now, a waitress's kid had just called him out. Nobody moved. The polished marble mirrored the golden chandeliers, which made the air feel tense like fire on glass. Finally, Clarissa's voice shattered the silence. "Get that kid away from the art before she breathes on it." The visitors laughed nervously, but the girl didn't back down. She was 12 years old, and the daughter of the hotel's nightly waitress. Her name was Amara Johnson. She donned a plain white shirt and black skirt, which is the kind of uniform that is supposed to blend in, but nothing about this time would let her disappear again. "You heard me," Amara murmured softly, her voice shaking just enough to demonstrate that she was brave, not scared. "It's not real." The billionaire's eyes got smaller. "How would you know that?" Amara gazed up at the beautiful painting, the gentle blue strokes of Monet's water lilies shining in the perfect museum light, and muttered, "Because Monet never used titanium white in 1895. "But your painting does." Everyone in the room took a deep breath at the same time. A journalist from Art Weekly misplaced his phone somewhere in the rear. This wasn't merely a brave thing to say. It was a spark that would set off a maelstrom of scandals, revelations, and inquiries that would shock the art world to its very core. But at that moment, in the bright lights of the Kingsley Grand Hotel, all everyone could see was a tiny black girl who had the guts to speak up. Another female they were about to underestimate. And that's where our black story starts. Welcome to Hidden Worth, the channel where we find the truth, the genius, and the courage that are hiding in plain sight. Stay until the conclusion, because this time, what you're about to hear isn't just a narrative about art. It's about value, about who gets to be seen and who the world seeks to forget. They never saw her. Not really. Amara Johnson, who was 12 years old, had strolled through the big hallways of the Kingsley Grand Hotel more times than she could count. But to the guests who walked through the identical rooms in fine suits and silk gowns, she was simply another shadow. Only the kid of the help. Monique Johnson, her mother, has worked at the hotel for more than 10 years. Monique worked as a server in the VIP dining area and was recognized for being professional, quiet, fast, and out of sight. The rich liked this kind of worker, reliable and quiet. Amara would sit in the rear service hallway after school and wait for her mom to finish work. At first, she would sketch on napkins and then fold them into cranes. But in the end, she found the staff library, which was a little, hidden area behind the maintenance closet that no one else had seen. Amara's world opened up there, surrounded by old art catalogs, French auction records, and old museum brochures that had been thrown away. She read everything. People threw away art history books because they were too old. French and Italian monographs. She even read books that were all in German. She slowly learned how to translate them using free language applications on her mom's broken phone. She didn't learn the same way as other kids. She didn't have any tutors or classes to help her become ready. She had what the rich folks forgot about. Amara had a gift that no one expected from a girl who carried her books in a reusable grocery bag and wore sneakers that were 2 sizes too big. She had a memory that was almost like a picture. Her eyes could see patterns in brushstrokes, lighting problems, and pigment separation, things that other people missed. She had no idea how remarkable she was. At first, no. She only knew that art made her feel seen. Every afternoon, while her mom filled up the champagne glasses upstairs, Amara would sit cross-legged on the worn carpet in the staff library, turning pages with her soft fingers. She learned how Caravaggio painted light like a weapon, and how Monet's garden changed colors depending on the time of day. She really liked the case studies on forgery. They showed her how to look at a painting like a detective, not only what it was, but also what it was trying to be. She first saw the Monet in person through a small opening in a service door. It had just been put in the private ballroom. Everyone was talking about it, a $20 million masterpiece that had been transported in under-armed guard and was the most important piece in Mr. Kingsley's collection. Amara had felt her breath stop, but not because they were scared, because something about it didn't seem right. The brushwork was too unsure. There is a small problem with the palette. The texture didn't feel the way she thought it would. She couldn't explain it at that moment, so she began to dig. She found every Monet painting from that time that was known, looked at them side by side, made notes, kept track of how many pigments were available each year, investigated titanium white. She didn't tell anyone. Who would pay attention? She was merely a black youngster with no last name that was important. A girl with shiny shoes and an ironed uniform who was taught to only speak when spoken to. She didn't talk much in school. A lot of the time, teachers didn't pay attention to her. Even when she knew the answer, she didn't raise her hand very often. That made it easy. But at night, when the Kingsley Grand was quiet, Amara would sit with her notebooks and compare what the art world applauded to what she witnessed. She already knew the truth by the time the gala started, and the ballroom was full of diamonds and expensive labels. The Monet wasn't real. But she never meant to say anything. That night, she had simply come to silently look for her mom between dinner rounds, just to go home together, like always. Until Clarissa Doyle's voice rang out in the gallery, calling her a mistake, a mark, and something inside of Amara broke. She didn't mean to say anything, but her body did anything before her intellect did, and suddenly it was out there. The sound of her voice, what she said, her truth. That painting isn't real. As soon as she said it, she felt like every guest was looking right through her skin. She could almost hear what they were thinking. There is no way she knows what she's talking about. She is the daughter of a waitress. She is merely a child. Amara, on the other hand, knew something they didn't. She might not have had the correct attire, name, or education, but she had the appropriate look. And tonight, for the first time, finally, someone was going to see her. The quiet didn't last. It never does when money is in danger. Clarissa Doyle got better shortly. For a moment, her expression was locked in surprise, but then it turned into something sharper. Disdain. Is it a fake? This kid believes she knows everything now? She laughed and turned to the crowd as if she were waiting for applause. Maybe next she'll talk about how the wine goes with the food. Laughter followed. At first, it was timid, but it got louder as more people joined in, trying to lighten the mood with trite humor. Amara stayed still. She didn't move, and she still had her mother's serving platter in her hands. She hadn't meant to say anything, but now that she had, she wasn't going to take it back. Billionaire Roland Kingsley squinted his eyes from across the room. He didn't laugh. "Who is she?" he questioned sharply, his voice low but strong. Monique, who had just come in through the side entrance with a new bottle of champagne, stopped in her tracks. First, her gaze went to her daughter, then the audience, and finally, Mr. Kingsley. "She's with me," Monique whispered quietly as she moved forward. "My daughter. I apologize if you allowed your kid to go inside a gallery that was off limits." Clarissa yelled, cutting her off. "This is what happens when we lower our standards. Next, they'll be putting their dirty hands on the art." That one word, they, hung in the air like smoke. Monique's face turned pale, but Amara raised her chin. She answered in a calm voice, "I never touched the painting. I just looked, very closely." Clarissa rolled her eyes. "Sweetheart, do you even know who made it?" "Claude Monet," Amara said without thinking. "Water lilies. which is part of his 1895 series. But the pigments do have titanium white, which wasn't utilized in business until 1916. The signature is at the wrong spot, and the brushwork isn't really sure of itself. Another break, this time for a longer time. Then Dr. Evelyn Harper, curator of the Kingsley collection, spoke in a quiet, graceful voice. She came out of the crowd and fixed her silver-framed glasses. Her eyes gently looked over Amara, not in a mean way, but in a careful way. She stepped closer and urged, "Say that again." "About the color?" Amara turned to her and thanked her for asking. "White titanium." Monet frequently employed lead white or zinc white in his paintings from the 1892. This has a cold undertone that doesn't fit with his other works from that time. Also, the layers are too slick. Monet's later strokes normally made a build-up like this, but this one doesn't. Dr. Harper blinked. This was not a kid saying random facts. This constituted analysis, reasoning that is clear, specific, and at an intellectual level. "How did you find that out?" "What?" she asked. Amara thought for a moment and then looked at her mother. Monique offered a small nod. "From books," Amara said, "old ones, in the library for personnel, and when I could access it, the hotel's Wi-Fi. I taught myself." Clarissa made a loud snort. "She taught herself?" she said softly. "That's funny. An art historian who taught themselves. What's next? She can speak French well?" Amara said, "I am," in a calm voice. "French, Italian. I'm learning German." Dr. Harper's mouth opened a little. Mr. Kingsley crossed his arms and looked upset. Clarissa's voice got higher, sharper, and harsher. "Are we really thinking that this child knows more about art than a dozen professionals? This makes no sense." Amara's eyes didn't move. "I didn't say I know more. I only said what I saw." Mr. Kingsley turned to Dr. Harper. "Sir, if I may, I think we should take this seriously." Kingsley looked at the painting behind him, then at the girl. The phrases she used, like pigment composition, brush confidence, and signature placement, were not things a youngster would just happen to say. His pride, nevertheless, was still hurt. This painting was one of his own. He bought it at a private auction in Paris. The papers that proved who they were rock solid. He added in a harsh voice, "I spent $20 million on that piece. 3 institutions have confirmed it." Amara shrugged her shoulders. "Then they might have been wrong." A group gasps, this one sharper than the others. Dr. Harper coughed. "With your permission, I'd like to do a full reevaluation. In a quiet way, I can bring in the tools tonight." Kingsley didn't say anything. His jaw got stiff. He didn't like looking hesitant, especially in front of other people. At the same time, Clarissa was so angry she was almost shaking. This is a joke. A youngster, the daughter of a waitress, is telling us what to do with a billion-dollar collection. That's when Monique came forward. Her eyes flared with something sharper than fear, the fire of a mother. She said, "My daughter didn't want to be noticed. But now that you have, think about why you're so mad that she might be right." The room was quiet again, a silence that wasn't because they were confused but because they were uncomfortable. 2 worlds had come together. One was made of money, prestige, and marble floors, and the other was based on brains, hard work, and borrowed books. And for the first time in that ballroom, it wasn't clear whose world was in charge. They waited until after midnight. The ballroom had been empty for hours. The string quartet had put away their instruments. The VIPs had gone back to their penthouses. Their laughing echoed down long hallways before fading away. But in the private conservation room at the back of the gallery's east wing, a different kind of meeting was just getting started. Dr. Evelyn Harper wore a lab coat and stood next to a steel examination table. Her gloves were tightly fastened to her hands. She was a precise woman with 42 years of experience in art conservation, a Harvard education, and respect from people all over the world. But today, she felt an anxious flutter in her chest that she hadn't felt in decades. There was a 12-year-old girl with a spiral notebook and a plastic pencil pouch standing next to her tonight. Amara. No blazer, no degree, no credentials. It was like an X-ray machine for the brain. Dr. Harper pointed to the painting. which was now lying flat under a sheet of UV transparent glass and had been taken out of its fancy frame. Without its gold leaf armor, the Monet, or what everyone assumed was a Monet, seemed strangely weak. Dr. Harper remarked softly, "Let's start with the lights." Amara nodded and moved the special lamp so that it was low and leisurely on the canvas. The texture looked like waves on a pond as shadows moved over it. The beam of light made the paint shine a little, showing ridges and brushstrokes that were not evident in the gallery light. "Right there," Amara said, pointing. "The light breaks on the petals too cleanly. Monet's impasto always had a little bounce to it and a delicate blur. This feels stiff, regulated, almost like a machine." Dr. Harper moved in closer and held her breath. She hadn't spoken anything out loud, but she had that similar feeling when she was installing it. There was no doubt that the painting was wonderful, but it didn't have any soul. She changed to the infrared scanner. The machine buzzed as layer after layer of paint disappeared from the screen, peeling off the top to show the ghostly underpainting below. Amara looked at the screen. No charcoal drawing, no base drawing. Monet usually worked in steps. He drew the outline first, but it's there. This one? No. Just color on color. Dr. Harper scowled. "You're right. That's quite strange." Then came the time that none of them talked about, but both were looking forward to: the study of pigments. She carefully scraped a tiny flake off the bottom corner of the canvas and put it under the spectrometer. The machine flickered twice and then showed the results on the screen. Dr. Harper said, "Titanium white, new formulation, made after 1916. The picture had a date of 1895. There was a long silence between them. Dr. Harper glanced at the screen with her lips pulled together. Amara stood next to her with her hands at her sides. Finally, Dr. Harper spoke. "Do you know what this means?" Amara nodded slowly. "It's a fake." "No," the older woman said kindly. "It's a very good fake. Someone who wasn't a beginner did this. Whoever painted this learned a lot about Monet's art. They looked at his hand and tried to copy his palette, but they couldn't copy his soul." Amara took a step back and swallowed hard. "So, I wasn't just dreaming it?" Dr. Harper answered, "Not at all. You were right about your gut feeling. What do you think?" "Exact." She turned all the way around to face the girl, her eyes looking for Amara's face. "How long have you been learning art this way?" "Since I was 7, Amara remarked in a low voice. "I couldn't pay for real lessons, so I just watched and read. I heard through the walls throughout expert tours. I found some ancient books, got free apps. I learned on my own." Dr. Harper's face relaxed. "Do you know how unusual that is?" Amara looked down. No one ever suggested it was important. People only see a youngster in a uniform. "Not anymore," Dr. Harper said. She stepped over to the wall and took out a sealed packet. It had the original authenticity documents from the auction company inside. She put them on the table next to the picture, which suddenly looked far less important than it did an hour ago. She said, "This goes to verification tomorrow morning, in a quiet way, but in whole. I'll also make sure you get credit for the first analysis." Amara blinked. "But I'm not a real expert." Dr. Harper smiled a little. "Now you are." They stood there for a few moments, letting the weight of what had just happened sink in. The lights of Chicago blinked against the dark sky outside. A 12-year-old girl had just taken on the best and won the first round. Under the layers of paint, pride, ego, and tradition, truth was finally coming through, and it looked a lot like her. Roland Kingsley didn't know how to doubt. The man had built an empire on certainty in business, art, and the stock market. He went with his gut. He had faith in his money. He also believed that anything with his name on it was already great by the time it got to him. Kingsley didn't blow up when Dr. Evelyn Harper told him the next morning that the Monet might not be real. He didn't yell. He didn't even yell. He only said, "Get me the painting." A few minutes later, 2 assistants wheeled in the now famous piece, which was still unframed and lying quietly under protective glass. Dr. Harper came next, bringing with him copies of the pigment analysis and infrared images. Kingsley stood in the middle of his office, which appeared more like a fancy vault than a place to work. The walls were made of walnut from the floor to the ceiling. There was a sketch by Rembrandt on the wall behind his desk. Through large, triple-insulated windows, the Chicago skyline sparkled. He looked at the papers and quickly looked over the charts. Then he looked at the painting. For a long, calm time. "So you're telling me," he replied slowly, "that the daughter of a waitress saw something that a team of world-class experts missed?" "She didn't miss anything," Dr. Harper said in a calm voice. "She studied. She looked. She saw things that didn't add up. Then she showed them." Kingsley turned around. His jaw moved a little. "She's 12. And still right?" He stepped up to the artwork. "Bend a little." He peered back over his shoulder after studying the strokes up close. "Do you know what will happen if this gets out?" Dr. Harper crossed her arms. "Yes, but I'm more worried about what will happen if we bury it." "Evelyn," he remarked in a curt voice, "I have donors. I have people on my board. I have people who give me money. If people find out I paid $20 million for a fake..." "You'll get better," she said. "Your reputation could take a knock. But what about the girl? She could change it all." He got up straight. "Which girl?" "She'll be gone after the press cycle is over." "Not if we do the right thing." Kingsley didn't say anything. He disliked it when others outsmarted him. He felt like he was losing ground to everyone right now. A kid. A curator. A falsehood he had unintentionally put on display in gold and velvet for everyone to see. He remarked, "Maybe the analysis was wrong." It wasn't. It could be a mistake in the restoration. It's not. Maybe. "Roland," Dr. Harper remarked firmly, "you know it's not real. You knew it as soon as she said it. Be quiet, sharp, and cold." He moved to the window with his hands in his pockets and looked at the skyline. "Have you ever spent $20 million and felt like an idiot?" he said softly. Dr. Harper stood next to him. "No, but I've seen smart people get overlooked their whole lives because they didn't wear the appropriate suit or talk with the right accent. You have a chance to change the story." Kingsley kept looking at the city. He said, "I don't like being played." "Then stop acting like it didn't happen." Finally, he stared at her, and something in his face changed. The shell shattered, not a lot, but enough to let in a flash of something new: humility. Did she actually see all that, by herself? She did. He was quiet for a second. Then he looked back at the painting as if it had betrayed him personally. He said, "Bring in the verification team." Dr. Harper blinked. "You are giving permission for a full analysis?" "Yes, in a quiet way, but very well. I want to know how many other forgeries are out there if we have one. And what about the girl?" Kingsley thought for a moment. Then he let out a sigh. "She stays." He sat down at his desk, and the leather creaked under him. "But don't put her on a pedestal just yet. I want facts first." Dr. Harper nodded once. "You will get them." Kingsley stayed behind when she left the office and stared at the water lilies, which now looked a little less delicate and a lot more threatening. A billionaire's pride has just been hurt. But in the backdrop of his business, a waitress's daughter was quietly changing the rules. It was almost 12:30 inches the morning, when the lock's key rotated. The heavy door of the Kingsley Collection's private study library creaked slightly against the polished marble floors as Dr. Evelyn Harper pushed it open. The smell inside was familiar. Old books, preserved paper, and a hint of cedar wood. Amara trailed behind her, walking quietly and holding a worn notebook and a pencil with the eraser almost gone. She wasn't used to being asked to come inside places like this, where the air smelled important and the walls spoke history. The library wasn't big, but it had a lot of books. There were shelves on every wall, from the floor to the ceiling. Each shelf was full of first edition books, unpublished auction records, and catalogs that were no longer in print. There was a rolling ladder in the far corner, and a massive wood table in the middle of the room that had been polished to a near-mirror gloss. Dr. Harper softly shut the door and turned to Amara. "You've been sneaking into the hotel's old library carts for the past 5 years, she remarked, with a sardonic smirk. "Let's see what you can do when you get to the good stuff." Amara didn't answer straight away. Her eyes were wide as she looked at the titles on the shelf and saw names she had only seen in footnotes and image captions: Berenson, Friedlander, and Gombrich. Do you mean I can use these? Dr. Harper nodded. Anything in this room. Choose what you want. Show me what you see. Amara put her notebook on the table with shaking hands. She started with a big hardcover book from the middle shelf called Monet, The Complete Works, 1,881,900. It was bound in navy linen. She opened the book to the index, turned to the Water Lily series, and started to compare the dates, brushwork annotations, and signature locations. She turned pages rapidly but methodically, drawing diagrams in her notebook and comparing how she used pigments, how she layered them, and how big her canvases were. As she mumbled in French, her pencil scratched quietly against the paper. "Why are you speaking French?" Dr. Harper inquired. Amara looked up. Most of Monet's notes were never translated. The way he talked about light, movement, and color in the original text helps me grasp his routines. Dr. Harper was sitting across the table from her, watching her. Not with laughter, but with wonder. This wasn't copying. This wasn't a guess. This was a study. Smart, deep, and planned out. Amara then took down a 2003 auction house catalog called Impressionist and Modern Art, Spring Sales, Paris. She flipped to the lot that identified the Monet in question. There was a high-gloss picture, a short description, and a remark from a minor French authenticator on the page. Amara's forehead wrinkled. She said slowly, "This report doesn't have a lab test. No X-ray or spectroscopic. Just looking at it. Just looking at it." She grabbed another book, Modern Forgery Detection Techniques, and opened it to a part about synthetic pigments. Her fingertips ran along the timeline that was printed in the margin. She muttered, "There it is. People didn't make a lot of titanium dioxide for paint until 1921. And it wasn't stabilized in fine art oils until even later. Monet passed away in 1926, but this exact color didn't exist until 1950. Dr. Harper leaned forward, and her heart raced. "Are you sure?" Amara agreed. "Good." She unlocked her rucksack and took out a printed comparison sheet that showed side-by-side pictures of real Monets from the 1,890 seconds, and the artwork in question. They had circled each discrepancy in red, such as the brush pressure not being the same, the water lily location being strangely symmetrical, and even a tiny mistake in the stroke angle at the bottom edge of the canvas. Dr. Harper shook her head. "This amount of detail, it's more advanced than some of the graduate theses I've overseen." Amara murmured softly, "I'm just doing what I see." Dr. Harper grinned. "You're not following. You are in charge." For almost 3 hours, they labored. Amara took notes on 7 pages, reviewed a dozen sources, and made a well-organized argument that would work in any academic setting. Amara's eyelids were weary by the time the old clock in the corner hit 4 a.m., but her hands kept moving. Dr. Harper stood up and put a soft touch on her shoulder. She said, "That's enough for tonight. You've done more than enough." Amara looked up. "Are you going to tell Mr. Kingsley?" Dr. Harper said, "I already did. But he'll hear it again tomorrow, this time in your words." Amara's breath caught in her chest. "My words?" Dr. Harper nodded. "Yes. This is what you found. And if we're going to fix this, we have to do it correctly, with honesty, ethics, and your voice." Amara looked down at her pages, which were sloppy, smudged, and full of facts. For the first time, they didn't feel like secrets written down in the dark. They seemed like proof. The lab smelled like varnish and wood that had been around for a long time. There were rows of equipment around the walls, including spectrometers, UV scopes, microscopes, and carbon dating units that buzzed like bees in a swarm. This was more than just a lab. It was the Kingsley Conservation Wing, which was designed to check the authenticity of works of art worth millions of dollars. For the first time in its history, the youngest individual to join its inner circle this morning was not a technician or curator. She was a girl of 12 wearing black sneakers. As the team of experts was ready to do a comprehensive examination of the Monet, Amara Johnson stood next to Dr. Evelyn Harper. They wore pressed suits, heavy spectacles, and the kind of suspicious looks that come from having too many degrees and not enough shocks. Dr. Harper cleared her throat. "Hey everyone, this is Amara. She was the first to notice. She'll be helping out today. There was a pause. Then there was a gentle clatter of a chair as one technician turned around without saying anything. Another person nodded against their will. One man laughed quietly. Amara felt the pain, but she didn't move. She had been invisible previously. But this time she had proof. The painting was on a bespoke easel and under a wide examining light. The hues were gentle and glowing, with blues, greens, and a dash of yellow in the lilies. It looked gorgeous from a distance. When I got closer, it looked fishy. Dr. Harper remarked, "Let's start with UV." One of the specialists turned over a bulb. The light in the room went out. The light moved slowly across the painting. Repairs that were hidden started to shine. Amara moved closer, her notebook already open. "Look at that," she pointed, retouching in the lower left corner. "Monet didn't do that with the final work. That's either a restoration or a disguise." Mr. Landon, the head technician, scowled. "Retouching could be from past conservation work." "But the varnish is wrong," Amara said. "It glows in different ways. It wasn't put on with resin from the 1800s. Landon gazed at her with a hint of surprise, then back to the canvas. He murmured, "Okay, let's check out the paint." The next step was to look at the pigments. Samples were taken with a microscope and put under the spectrometer. Amara sat calmly with her fingers crossed, watching the screen flicker. The results arrived quickly. Too quickly. Landon remarked, "Titanium white," with a frown. "Blend with high opacity. Formulation after 1945. A quiet murmur went throughout the room. Amara looked at Dr. Harper, who offered a small nod. Landon changed the settings. "Let's go deeper." The next test looked at the canvas itself, including the weave, the priming, and the age of the fiber. They put a small slice under a digital microscope. One helper said, "This texture is the same all over. Machine-made. There are no flaws in the hand-loomed canvas. Not from the 1800s. Another person said, "It gets worse. The ground layer has chemicals that keep it stable. New ones." Dr. Harper looked at Kingsley, who had discreetly come in during the test and was standing near the entrance in a tailored gray suit with his arms crossed. "I hope you're seeing this," she continued. "I see it," he said, voice tight. Next, they did carbon dating. It would take longer, but the early results were already very evident. The painting was fake. Yes, it's a great one, but it's still a fake. Amara stayed quiet. She didn't cheer, not a smile. Instead, she turned to the last page of her notes and started writing anew, listing every confirmation, finding, and technique the forger utilized. Landon finally looked at her. He didn't smile this time. "How did you find out?" he asked. Amara looked up. "I didn't know. I saw." He stopped for a moment and then nodded. He said, "Not bad. Not bad at all." Kingsley moved slowly ahead. His eyes looked over the painting, as if it had done something wrong to him. "This object has been on exhibit for 3 months. I led tours. I said nice things about it. I told others how great it was. Dr. Harper didn't brag. She only said, 'Now you know better.'" Amara looked at Kingsley. Looked for the first time. He said, "You were right." Amara blinked. "I was just being honest." He nodded once. "And that makes you a threat." The group broke up slowly, talking in hushed voices. Amara stayed behind and looked over her notes at the table like it was just another Tuesday. Dr. Harper put a hand on her shoulder. "You know what just happened?" "Yes," Amara answered in a hushed voice. "But it's not done." "Yes," Harper said. "It's just starting." Now the question wasn't whether the art was real. The question was who had made it. And how many more were still on walls all throughout the world. It smelled like coffee and lemon polish in the kitchen at the Kingsley Grand. Now it was quiet. The dinner rush was done, the marble worktops were clean, and the silverware was put away. Monique Johnson sat in the back corner, her back straight, and her hands around a chipped ceramic mug. The fluorescent light flickered above her. Her name tag was gone, and her apron was neatly folded next to her. She looked worn, like she was tired to the bone, yet her eyes still had that calm focus that her daughter possessed. Dr. Evelyn Harper, who had asked for the appointment in person, sat across from her, not as a museum curator, not as a museum worker, but as a woman who needed to express something real, without cameras, microphones, or voices in the boardroom. "Monique," she said softly, "I wanted to talk to you. About Amara." Monique raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Harper went on. "I've worked with gifted students before. Smart ones. But I've never met somebody like your daughter. What she did and what she saw are things that most qualified experts wouldn't have done." Monique nodded once. She always sees things that other people don't. Harper leaned in a little. Where did she get that? Who taught her to study that way? To watch and think critically? Monique smiled, but not with pride. She remembered. "I didn't have time to teach her much," she remarked. "I worked 2 shifts a day, 6 days a week. Some evenings I returned home and was too tired to even take off my shoes." She stopped for a moment and ran her fingertips around the edge of the mug. "But I did give her one thing: room. I let her ask me things. I let her sit quietly with her books and thoughts. And I never told her what she couldn't be." Dr. Harper's throat got constricted. "She told me you used to sneak her into staff meetings." Monique chuckled softly. "She used to hide behind the pastry cart. I thought you didn't see." Harper smiled. "She said you gave her your phone so she could get language apps. That you didn't take a break for lunch so she could sit near the art library." Monique didn't care. She just shrugged. She wanted to know. "I merely made space for it. But you could have told her to be quiet, to stay out of sight." "Yes, I did," Monique answered. "Many times. But you can only beg a brilliant light to dim itself for so long until it starts to blink." Harper leaned back and was quiet for a bit. "She's going to make things better," she said. "I know. Do you sometimes wish her fantasy was quieter, something simpler?" Monique smiled again, but this time it was sad. "I wish the world didn't make her work so hard to be seen. But no, I don't want my dreams to be smaller. I just want her to realize that she can take up space." Then she glanced up and spoke clearly. "I thought my job was to help folks like you when I was a kid, that I would never fit in those rooms. I promised myself that if I ever had a daughter, I wouldn't let her inherit that falsehood." Harper swallowed hard. "She didn't get it from her parents," she remarked. "She changed it. One woman was wearing a lab coat, and the other was wearing a kitchen outfit. Different names, same truth." Finally, Monique posed the question that had been in the air between them the whole time. "What now?" Harper took a big breath. "She is being asked to temporarily join our authentication team, paid, credited, honored, and I'll be personally teaching her." Monique's hands shook a little. "She's still a kid," she said. "She needs to go to school. She needs pals. She needs room to grow without being in the news all the time." Harper vowed, "She'll have that. We're not here to take her light. We're here to keep it safe." Monique nodded slowly. "Then I trust you." Harper stopped at the door as she was about to leave. "Monique, I know this might sound strange, but you didn't just raise a smart person." Monique raised her head. Harper remarked, "You raised a mirror. One that is making this place, all of us, see ourselves clearly for the first time." Monique sat alone for a bit after she departed, looking down at her empty mug. Then she grinned to herself in a sweet way. Because in a world that had always looked down on mothers like her and eliminated girls like her daughter, people were finally seeing them. The Kingsley Foundation's conference room looked more like a fancy art gallery than a place to have meetings. The selected walls were lit up by spotlights. The polished wood mirrored the shine of million-dollar purchases, and the thick velvet chairs made men who were used to being the smartest person in the room feel better about themselves. But today, the sharpest person in the room didn't have a place to sit. She stood still near the window with her hands folded and a notebook next to her. Amara Johnson was her name, 12 years old, no degree. But today, she possessed something that no one else had, the truth. Roland Kingsley sat at the head of the table with his jaw set and his eyes moving around the room. Dr. Evelyn Harper was next to him. The verification crew was next to her. Adrien Leclerc, an art dealer from Paris, sat across the table. He wore a silk tie and had a smile like a fox. 6 months earlier, Adrien sold Kingsley a Monet painting. Today, he was there for a follow-up conversation which he had agreed to without knowing how drastically the power had shifted. Kingsley remarked, "Thank you for coming, Adrian. We just need more information about the provenance file for the Monet." "Of course," Adrian said as he reached into his leather bag. "Before the sale, everything was checked out. I'm fine with going over it again." Harper pushed a folder across the table. "We already have the papers, though, and we've done a second check." Adrian's smile faded. Kingsley didn't even blink. "We hired professionals, not dependent. The whole world. And a really keen set of eyes." Amara moved forward at that point. She hadn't spoken anything yet, just put one picture on the table. It was a high-resolution close-up of Monet's brushwork under UV light. Adrian squinted. "What is this?" Harper remarked, "A synthetic binding agent, one that wasn't available until after 1950. Kingsley moved closer. "So tell me again, Adrian, how did Monet use things that weren't around when he was alive?" Adrian laughed softly and tapped the table with his fingers. "There must be a mistake. Maybe a restoration overlay? These things happen." Amara spoke for the first time, and her voice was calm. "Restoration materials are on top of the original layers. These are built into the base. The paint itself is new." Adrian stared at her and smiled. "And who are you?" "She was the one who caught the forgery," Harper stated. "Before anyone else." Adrian smiled again, but this time it was a little less wide. "Nice. A small art detective." Amara didn't move. She took 3 additional pictures out of her folder. They were comparisons of known forgeries that Leclerc's brokerage had sold during the past 2 years. Each one has the same unmistakable defect, same synthetic colors. The positioning of the suspicious signature is the same. Adrian's hand stopped moving. Amara said, "We also traced the brush pressure. Identical hesitations. The person who painted them tried to copy Monet's style, but they failed. All the time." Kingsley folded his arms and leaned back. "So, you either sold us a fake by mistake or you knew." Adrian's face moved. "This is slander." Harper said, "Not if it's true, and not if we have proof." Amara reached for her last piece, which was an email chain that had been translated. A leak from a former worker at Leclerc's company. It talked about a quiet commission project that involved making copies of European Impressionist paintings and holding private auctions. Adrian's gaze went from the paper to Kingsley and back again. "I need a lawyer." Kingsley grinned with little warmth. "Of course you do." Suddenly, Adrian sprang up and grabbed his briefcase. "This talk is over." But the door didn't open. 2 FBI agents came forward. They had been sitting quietly in the corner, clothed in regular clothing, and watching the whole thing happen. One of them remarked, "Actually, it's just getting started." Adrian stopped moving. Amara moved back to allow the evidence to sink in. Harper nodded quietly. Kingsley looked at her with something new in his eyes. Not just respect, but a kind of wariness. He was discovering that ignoring talent could be dangerous if you don't see it. They took Adrian outside without saying anything further. The room was quiet again. Kingsley finally spoke. "Well," he remarked as he stood up slowly, "it seems we owe our newest consultant a debt of gratitude." Amara nodded slightly. "I just went where the trail led me." Harper responded, "You didn't just follow it. You set it." And just like that, the girl who used to stand silently behind her mother's serving cart had flipped $1 billion business upside down. Not with power or position, but with facts, patience, and a pencil. The confession trap had worked, and the actual investigation had only barely begun. As soon as he spoke, the air in the gallery seemed to freeze anew. Adrian Leclerc's voice had lowered to an edge, calm, controlled, and too polished. The velvet drapes moved a little in the climate-controlled chamber behind him. The chandeliers shone above, and the smell of ancient oil paint lingered in the corners. Amara Johnson, who was standing next to Dr. Evelyn Harper and a small group of police officers, listened without getting upset. Her heart beat steadily, steady enough for her to understand even the most subtle French sentences. He said, "These Americans don't know how to appreciate fine European culture." He said it in French, but just to his aid. "These Americans don't get our refined European culture at all." And then, This little black girl can't possibly speak French like a smart person would. There was silence. The remarks rang in the gallery with the security lights on, as if they were being played back in slow motion. Amara's hands didn't get tighter. Her face didn't change, but something shifted in the room. A change that most people felt instead of saw. The billionaire art dealer had shown how arrogant he was. His disdain, his blind area. Dr. Harper came forward. "Could you say that again in English, please?" she asked nicely. Adrian's eyes moved throughout the room. He knew he had made a mistake, but the trap was already set. He coughed. "I told her that Americans don't understand our culture and that she couldn't speak French as well as smart people." Amara grinned a little bit. She converted to French without any trouble. "Mr. Leclerc," she said clearly, "I heard every word you just said, and I translated them all for everyone here." A murmur went through the group of guests, collectors, experts, and board members who were all there. Many of them thought that being in that gallery rendered them immune to scorn, but they were mistaken. Amara went on in French. "Your operations, your false authentications, your private sales of full-price copies, everything is documented. Et maintenant, tout le monde doit le savoir. Your operations, your fake authentications, your private sales of copies at full price, everything is documented. Now everyone needs to know." She slowly adjusted to English. "Look, it's not about the paint. It's about the folks who think their status shields them when they put down someone they think is weak." Everyone in the room looked at Adrian. His helper, who was wearing a white shirt that was a little bit untucked, turned aside. The cops wrote things down. One of them finally said, "Mr. Leclerc, you are being looked into for a number of art fraud and wire transfer fraud charges." Adrian's face turned pale. He opened his mouth and then closed it. He struggled to breathe out. The fake confidence broke. Amara stood still the whole time. She didn't yell. She didn't ask for applause. She didn't have to. The truth had done the job. Dr. Harper put a hand on Amara's shoulder. "You just made everyone hear what they were too comfortable to ignore," she stated in a low voice. Amara gazed at the girl who had usually stood behind her mother's serving cart and took notes while everyone else counted hors d'oeuvres. She remembered the nights she spent in the staff library after hours learning French, Italian, and German, not because anyone told her to, but because she didn't want to be invisible. She wasn't now. A tall woman named Miss Foster, who was on the board, stepped forward. There was a small shake in her voice. "Miss Johnson, will you continue to be a consultant on our inquiry team?" Amara looked her in the eye. She nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The crowd let out a sigh. The moment was over. The cameras went off. Phones went up. Before the security doors even fully opened, the hashtag number "Talent Has No Uniform" started to trend. Roland Kingsley saw all of this from his office suite, which looked out over Lake Michigan. He had lost more than just a painting. He had abandoned the idea that pedigree and privilege are the only things that can ensure truth. He also learned that brilliance can sometimes wear ordinary clothes and old sneakers. Agents took Adrian out of the gallery. His phone was vibrating, and his briefcase was still open on the floor. The visitors stopped talking, and their polite masks fell off. Amara moved her weight a little. Under the gallery lighting, her plain shirt and skirt looked good, but her stance changed. Now she had something more than respect. She carried recognition. Dr. Harper gave her a letter of support from the Kingsley Foundation that thanked her for her work on the investigation and invited her to continue working with them. Amara took it, and her smile was little but true. Then she said one last thing for everyone to hear. "Everyone in this gallery knows how much something costs. But we should remember how important it is to see someone for who they are, not what someone else thinks they are." The cameras went off again. The lights got brighter. The reporters leaned in. She turned to find her mother, Monique Johnson, standing just outside the velvet line. She was no longer hidden. Tears shone in Monique's eyes. Amara realized that this moment was more important than an art scandal. It was a plea to transform the way we listen, how we show respect, how we act towards someone who might not be there but is definitely able. In that gallery, where money, ego, and heritage were on display, a 12-year-old child had told the truth. And everyone paid attention. It has never been this quiet at the Kingsley Tower office before. Roland Kingsley stood at the edge of the huge glass wall and looked down at the Chicago skyline, a city founded on ambition and old money. His reflection in the mirror seemed older today, but not because he was older. It was because of what had been taken away. The news spread quickly. The news throughout the world said, fake Monet worth $12 million found. Fraud was sold to the top collector in the US. But the worst headline wasn't about the painting at all. It was about the person who found the deception. Black waitress's daughter outsmarts elite art world. Kingsley hadn't said much since Adrienne Leclerc was arrested. The FBI was still going through financial records and transactions that crossed borders. But it wasn't simply the deceit that tormented Kingsley. He realized that he had been tricked. And worse, the warning flags had been right in front of him, but he didn't listen to what someone else said. His phone rang again. A museum donor has asked to take back their money again. A gala that was supposed to happen has been canceled. Another communication from his PR firm telling him to stay quiet. Silence is what brought us here, he said to himself. He turned away from the window and sat down at the oak desk, which used to feel powerful but now seemed heavy. The Monet was gone, and in its place was a picture of the Kingsley Foundation's founders in a frame. His great-grandfather, in black and white, with a tilted top hat, was the first of the Kingsleys to curate culture, as the family had always asserted. Roland wasn't thinking about his legacy just now, though. He was thinking of Amara Johnson, how she had stood in the gallery, calm and serene, setting out facts that his staff had overlooked, how she hadn't yelled, bragged, or asked for anything. She had been right. That, more than anything else, had broken something inside of him. Someone knocked on the door. Dr. Evelyn Harper came in. She said, "We need to talk." Roland nodded and pointed to the seat across from him. He started with, "Evelyn, I don't need another lecture. I already know I made a mistake." "This wasn't a mistake," she added as she sat down. "It was a blind spot. And it's bigger than you." He raised his head. "You think I don't see that now?" "No, I guess you finally do." She took out a folder that had a bunch of internal memos, reports, and letters from donors in it. "Half of our board wants to stay away from us. The other half wants to utilize Amara's face in every future campaign and make her our next diversity success story." Roland's jaw was tight. "She isn't a mascot." Evelyn said, "No. She is a mirror, and we can all see what she sees today." There was silence again. It was Roland who broke it. "I didn't pay attention to her because of what she was wearing, what she did, and how quiet she was. I thought she was just a background character." Evelyn replied softly, "You thought she wasn't you, and now you know she's the future." He let that go. "I've built this empire on acquisitions, Evelyn," he remarked in a hushed voice. "I know how to buy things, how to gather. But for some reason, I forgot how to tell what was real." She moved forward. "Now do something else." He looked at her, empty because of how badly he had failed. "I want to pay for her schooling. In a quiet way. Completely. Anything she needs." Evelyn nodded. "We'll take care of it. And I want her name to be at the top of the list of people working on the case. She earned it." He got up, walked back to the window, and put his hands in his pockets. "I've spent my whole life trying to be the kind of man whose name would be remembered in museums. And it took a 12-year-old to show me that the most important thing is to see someone when no one else does." Evelyn also stood up. "She doesn't need your guilt, Roland," she said. "She just needs your help. And your respect." He nodded, but not really at her. For the first time in his life, Roland Kingsley, the billionaire collector who used to think that diplomas and dollar signs were the only things that made someone an expert, realized how fragile heritage is. And they knew that real value was never merely something to put on a wall. It has to be worked for. And sometimes, through the eyes of someone the world almost forgot to see, they are rediscovered. The first thing I saw was a brief news story called "The Girl Who Outsmarted the Art World." It was filmed outside the Kingsley Foundation and showed a calm and inscrutable 12-year-old girl in a basic blazer and sneakers walking by reporters. After that, the clip went viral on social media. It received more than 3 million views by lunchtime. It was everywhere by nightfall. Hello, America. This morning on CBS, The show today. Headlines poured in. 1. 2-year-old uncovers $12 million. Art fraud. Daughter of Waitress identifies fake Monet. And from invisible to indispensable. And with every story and every interview request, there was the question that no one had thought to ask before. What is Amara Johnson? The lights in the studio were bright, but Amara didn't flinch. She sat across from news anchors and was surrounded by art historians and forensic specialists. She never spoke loudly or acted for the camera. She was honest, the same manner she always did. In one part, she added, "I noticed something small, something that didn't seem right, so I made inquiries, and I kept digging." In another interview, the host raised the question directly, "How did you, at 12 years old, see what experts with PhDs and decades of experience didn't?" Amara answered right away, "Because I wasn't attempting to save anyone's reputation. I was just attempting to figure out what the painting meant." The video spread like wildfire. People who wrote about her admired her calmness, intelligence, and lack of ego. Researchers were amazed by how well she could see patterns. Museum boards rushed to look over their own ways of authenticating. Parents all throughout the country interrupted the news and beckoned their kids over to the living room. "Look at this girl," they said. "Look what she did." Amara didn't like the lights, or the focus, but she knew that the occasion was bigger than her. She spoke for every child who had ever been left out. Every parent works a late shift. All of their skills were hidden by uniforms and silence. A journalist asked her at one point if she was going to apply to Harvard. She smiled. "Harvard can get in touch with me." People in the crowd laughed, but Amara didn't sound cocky. It was true. She had learned that real worth doesn't need to ask for permission. Soon, universities and cultural institutions all throughout the country started asking him to speak. Panels of artists, TED Talks, and youth gatherings. She said no to most of them. In one TV interview, she said, "I'm still in middle school. I have more homework to do. I still have to go to bed." But she did make one exception, the National Gallery of Art. She stood behind a podium at a special event in Washington, D.C., and her voice echoed across the rotunda. "My mom taught me that people will try to tell you where you don't belong, but only you can decide what you can do." She stopped for a moment. "I wasn't supposed to be in those rooms, but I was, and I paid heed. That's the only reason I'm here right now." The screen behind her showed two pictures side by side, one of the fake Monet under UV light, and one of Amara as a toddler cuddled up next to a pile of library books while her mom cleaned the marble floors. The hall was full of applause. Amara and Monique sat in a corner booth at a quiet restaurant near DuPont Circle that night. "Are you okay with all this attention?" Monique asked as she stirred her tea. Amara took some time to think, then they nodded. "I don't need them to cheer," she remarked. "I just need them to see." And they did. For the first time, the country viewed a young black girl, not as a prodigy to be shown off, but as an expert who deserved to be there, not via connections, not because of privilege, but by calm brilliance and never-ending inquiry. Now the whole world was watching. But Amara didn't want to be famous. She wanted everything to be fair. And she was just getting started. It began gently, not with fireworks or news stories, but with an email. Then 2, then 50. By the end of the week, Amara's email was full of letters from museum interns, high school art teachers, librarians who worked the night shift, and adolescent girls who lived in communities like hers. The messages didn't seek for help. They didn't want signatures. They told each other stories. "I thought I had to wait for someone to let me see. I've always loved art, but I never thought someone like me could work in a museum. Thanks for reminding me that I'm not invisible." And with each message, Amara learned something. Her narrative was no longer simply hers. It had turned into a door, and people were ready to go through it. The Kingsley Foundation, which used to be full of velvet ropes and polished marble, started to change too. At first, things moved slowly. A new scholarship fund, a new internship program, and an open call for independent researchers. But the most important change wasn't in the rules. It was in the people. During their lunch intervals, security officers began going to conservation talks. Kitchen personnel were asked to come to art theory seminars in the evening. The woman who folded napkins in the events department turned out to have studied the history of textiles. No one has ever inquired before. Now, the doors were opening, not merely to galleries but also to new chances. Amara was quietly proud of what she saw. She didn't want a statue. She didn't want to be in the spotlight. She wanted the silence to stop, the kind of silence that comes from never being asked what you know. Dr. Evelyn Harper took her to the museum's off-site storage vault one day. This was a place that not many people ever saw. There were crates of paintings, some of which were hundreds of years old, wrapped in linen and stored in rows that were like sleeping giants. "Are you ready?" Harper inquired. Amara nodded. They strolled together past costly paintings and stopped in front of an empty easel. Harper said, "This is where the Monet used to be, before you showed it." Amara got closer. "I want you to pick what goes in its place." Amara blinked. "Me?" "Yes," Harper responded. "Something real. Something that makes us remember why we do this." Amara took some time to think. She said, "I want a picture of my mom, in her work clothes, standing in the gallery." Harper grinned. "That's brave." "That's the point," Amara said. "People need to remember who made these sites, who makes sure they work, who gets left out of the stories we put on walls." So they did it. There was a black and white picture of Monique Johnson standing proudly next to the gallery she used to clean in silence. It was now where the phony Monet used to be. There was a little plaque under it that said, "Real value is not always framed in gold." People stopped coming. They looked. Some took photos. People posed queries. And in that place, which used to be exclusive for the rich and powerful, a new type of respect grew. It spread out. Other organizations started going over their staff lists again, this time looking for skills as well as credentials. Community art centers began to offer night classes to their personnel, which led to jobs as curators. Universities changed their admissions rules to take into account both academic performance and real-world experience. Then there was the list. A committee of museum directors and cultural experts put together a national list of voices in art and history that hadn't been heard before. Amara's name was first on the list, not because she requested it, but because her tale showed what happens when someone is finally acknowledged. Things changed at home too. The flat didn't get bigger, but it did feel brighter. Monique's walk was easier. Their refrigerator was filled. Amara got a laptop for herself. They still used coupons, rode the bus, and folded laundry together at the end of the week. But now things were different. They may get in. Not giving. Not feeling sorry for someone. Access. Amara sat at the window one night with a sketchbook in her lap. She wasn't making art. She was coming up with ideas for a mentorship network, a free resource center, and a video series for students who can't get to museums. She looked up at her mom, who was making dinner. "Hey Mom," she said. "What if we built a location where kids could learn all this stuff without having to ask anyone?" Monique turned around, and the light from the stove lit up her face. "Baby," she continued, "you already did." Amara Johnson had already moved on by the time the headlines faded, and the next viral moment took over. Not from what happened, but toward what was important next. She was yet 12 years old, still folding her school clothes at night, still helping her mom take groceries up the stairs. But something about her had changed, not simply self-assurance, not just being recognized, something more. She had learned that truth doesn't need proof to be true. That greatness doesn't come with a name tag or a job title. That skill doesn't need an invitation. It just shows up. People had tried to make her feel like a minor character in someone else's story, but she had changed the script. And by doing that, she had also given others the right to come forward. Not everyone will be seen on national news. Not everyone will find worldwide fraud or walk through marble halls. But Amara's lesson wasn't about art. It was about value. The real value. The kind that doesn't dress up in a nice suit. The kind that tells the truth in a low voice. The kind that pays attention, listens, and learns, even when no one else believes you do. People who don't look like the traditional expert are easy to underestimate. It's especially simpler to miss someone who works behind the scenes. This narrative shows that brilliance can be found anywhere, not just in classrooms with ivy-covered walls or boardrooms with views of the skyline. People talk about it in the lunchroom, in the corners of the library, in notebooks for after-school shifts and after midnight. Even if the world hasn't seen it yet, it exists in you. You don't have to look the part to be the real deal, and you don't need anyone's permission to start becoming it. So, after watching this video, we want you to think on this question. What would happen if you stopped waiting for an invitation and began to act like you belong? It's possible that art analysis isn't your strong suit. It may be writing, or science, or music, or fixing engines, or looking after others. It matters, no matter what it is. It's true. And it should have a place at the table. But sometimes you need to make your own table first. That's what Amara did. And since she did, not only did the doors open for her, but they also opened for everyone behind her. So today, if you feel like no one sees you, hears you, or invites you, keep this in mind. You can be seen. You're just early. And the world is still trying to catch up to your brilliance. Don't turn it down while they do. Keep studying, keep getting bigger, keep talking, even if your voice shakes. Because someone, somewhere, needs to hear your story to find their own. And if this story meant something to you, whether it made you feel something in your stomach or reminded you of your own strength, don't let it end here. Send this video to someone who has been having doubts about themselves. Tag someone who needs to realize that being smart doesn't mean you have to dress a certain way. Welcome to Hidden Worth, where we tell stories that the world almost missed. Sign up so you don't miss the next one, because we're just getting started. And believe me, the next Amara is already out there, reading in the corner, listening in silence, waiting for a sign that they are important. Be that sign. And what if that next Amara is you? So, this is your time. Talent doesn't ask for permission. You shouldn't either.